scandal, Babe Ruth came along, and the combination of his incredible hitting ability and his magnetic personality and charisma just would have been enough to overcome any kind of a scandal. He was just a superstar. Before we used that word, that's what he was.
He underlined that star status in 1920. Ruth hit an astonishing 54 home runs.
You know, there are people who have broken his career home run record, but no one has ever dominated the hitting game the way Babe Ruth did. In 1920, Babe Ruth, as an individual, out-hit 14 of the 16 teams in the major leagues with home runs.
The man hit a lot of home runs. He hit 40 home runs, I think, 10 or 11 seasons. I mean, the man was a powerhouse.
The balls he hit were so soft, they actually wrap around the bat when you hit them. And he was hitting 400 and 500-foot home runs. Can you imagine the power behind that? Look at the power in those hips. See, that's where the power comes from. See how his legs, his hips totally turned. That's why I said when I'd swing big and I'd miss big, well, he totally wrapped himself right around. When he came around with that bat, he actually had a callus on this arm, because he'd go all the way around and it would take his body all the way around. And in 1916 and 1918, he was also swinging a 54-ounce bat, which is a tree. I think the biggest one now is 36, I think. I mean, it's not big at all. And he was a 54-ounce bat. That's how he did it.
There's no team in any American sport more recognizable than the Yankees. No baseball team have won the World Series more times. But without Babe Ruth, none of that would have been possible. He made the New York Yankees the franchise they are today.
The early years was that he made them into a winner. Starting in 1922 was their first pennant. 1922, 1923, 1926, 1927, 1928, 1932. Not only that, but those were 7 pennants with the Yankees. He was with 3 pennant winners with the Red Sox. A total of 10 World Series years. Amazing, amazing record.
Now a full-time right fielder, Ruth had made the game exciting, high-scoring and power-based. In 1923, the Yankees built a new stadium to accommodate all those fans who wanted a glimpse of the Babe.
You know, if you look at any culture and you say, one of the biggest buildings that have been built by that culture, you know, they haven't been cathedrals and stuff. They've been all these arenas and ballparks and things like that. And if you say, who's the patron saint of it all, it's Babe Ruth. Yankee Stadium, you know, way back then was built mainly because of him.
I don't think there's ever been an athlete in any sport who has been so revolutionary in the sense of attracting so many people.
Ruth had drawing power. Ruth was a star.
Yankee Stadium was always referred to as the house that Ruth built. They built it because the stadium they were playing in, a borrowed or rented stadium that the New York Giants played in, was just not large enough to hold all the fans that Babe Ruth was bringing along. So they built the stadium in 1923. Babe Ruth hits the first home run in the stadium. The Yankees win the World Series that year against the Giants. That's the point where he takes over the baseball world completely.
Babe Ruth had become King of New York. He was America's first ever real sporting celebrity.
He was just, at that time, the biggest star in American life, and really the template for the American culture of celebrity. He is quite likely the most photographed individual in American history. Marilyn Monroe, perhaps, or Elvis Presley, but at least as big as those people, if not bigger, in American culture.
But here was an accessible star, generous, humorous, and down-to-earth, and this everyman personality allowed Americans to identify with the Babe.
He looked like someone you could chat with on the street corner, and in fact you could. He never lost that common touch, even at the heights of his fame. And one day he'd be speaking to the President of the United States, rather informally, I might add. In fact, one day he looked at the President and he said, "Hot as hell, ain't it, Prez?" And the next day he'd be talking to you or me on the street corner, and just the same demeanor. What you saw was what you got.
Talking to the fans, being around the fans, was second nature to him. It wasn't a pressure. It was never a pressure. with his fans, when he was doing something, he didn't do it exclusively. He'd say, hey, come on, I'm going on a ride, come with me. And he'd bring you with him, that's why. He's beloved. He wasn't exclusive, he was always inclusive.
As Ruth became a household name, the US was experiencing a time of economic boom, and the world's biggest baseball star would personify the Roaring '20s.
He hit his stride as a baseball player in 1919, just as the Roaring '20s or the Jazz Age were taking off, and he was made for that.
He just had this huge, huge personality. He had an appetite for life.
He ate large, he drank large, he womanized large, he did everything large.
You know, all the men wanted to be him, all the women wanted to sleep with him. Yeah, the funny thing about Ruth is that the real person and the myth is sort of coincided. That was Babe Ruth.
Well, they didn't call it the Roaring '20s for nothing, and Babe was sat himself right in the middle of it. Yeah, it was, flappers, and he did have girls galore. Babe was accepted in every speakeasy in New York. He knew all the kingpins and the not-so-kingpins, and he didn't discriminate. Babe knew everybody. Everybody wanted to know Babe. You know, if Babe came over and said, how you doing, kid? You made it. That's all he had to say, how you doing, kid? And it was like everybody would walk on water. My mother said it was amazing.
But the fast living off the pitch was affecting Ruth's game. Overweight and blighted by injury, in 1925 he suffered his worst season, with just 25 home runs from 98 games.
He looked like he'd really let himself go, and that his bad living was going to get to him. And he spotted that, and he went out and got a personal trainer, another first thing.
Babe vowed that he would change, and change he did. He never did that again. He never did. He never thought of himself bigger than the game, or bigger than his fans.
The vigorous training regime paid off. 47 home runs followed in 1926, and the Yankees were back in a World Series final. It was his love of baseball that maintained his position at the top.
Most people think that he just played for the Yankees and then was a degenerate the rest of the time, but he wasn't a degenerate the rest of the time. As soon as the season ended, he was off on these barnstorming tours. Babe Ruth probably played baseball against a larger percent of the population than any baseball player who's come since.
By 1927, the Babe was at his best. He slugged the Yankees towards another World Series crown with 60 home runs, a season record that would last for 34 years.
I think his peak was probably 1927, the year that he hit 60 homers. The 1927 Yankees are considered by many historians to be the best baseball team of all time.
The Yankees won another World Series in 1928, but within a year, America and the rest of the world entered a period of economic crisis. Even in those times of depression, though, Ruth remained an inspirational figure. Despite being the game's biggest earner, few begrudged him that status.